Well, many of us are lucky to have a spouse, older offspring, or siblings sharing our space during this quarantine. Others have found themselves isolated. Some are extroverts, going mad from the lack of social interaction. Those same extroverts that have been insisting introverts leave their homes and socialize in public spaces. You know, be more like them. The irony is that those introverts now get to insist extroverts remain at home, something apparently they can't handle. When life returns to a measure of normality, we should all take a moment to remind ourselves who made this easier and who made it difficult. And on that, can we all agree now that Simon Sinek's rant against the use of technology as a tool of social interaction was incredibly tone-deaf? I mean, I hated the man when he vomited his misguided rant about millennials in the workspace, or when he accused the youth as being addicted to technology. Now he, like the rest of us, must rely on that same technology as our sole means of interaction. Look up irony in the dictionary when you have a chance. Obviously, the advent of technology allows us to play board games virtually via Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia. I elected for the latter, despite the popularity of the former in many online circles. But selection is limited, despite their claims, and they all cost money. And we should be frugal, despite my fiance and I buying a bunch of games just last week. We'll never learn. This could result in you perusing your selection of analog games, wondering what is available. In the realm of cooperative games, most of these are available, as even one stating a minimum of two players can often still be played by a player assuming two characters. Even games limited to two players often force them to play two characters each. Many of these are actually better, or at least easier, if you play with a maximum number. If you're fortunate to own one or more dedicated solitaire games, those are obvious, dependable possibilities. The Oniverse games, Onirim, Sylvion, Castellion, Nautilion, and Aeon, are all excellent choices. Though the first, Onirim, is clearly the most popular. There is also Deep Space D6 and The Chosen Few, which are also strictly solo-only games. Now, continuing on with these cooperative games, many feature solo mode variations. Gloomhaven can be played with a single character, as can Mansions of Madness 2nd Edition, Robinson Crusoe, Samurai Spirit, Spirit Island, Castle Panic, AEONS End, and Rising 5 Runes of Asteros, the latter of which has you play with all the available characters, regardless of player count. This leaves a bunch of cooperative games that generally recommend 2+ players, but can still be played with one, taking the role of 2 or even 4 characters without sacrificing a game's dynamic. These can include Legends of Andor, Flashpoint Fire Rescue, Forbidden Island, Forbidden Desert, The Captain is Dead, and The Big Book of Madness. Xenoshift, both Onslaught and Dreadmire, claim to be playable with one player assuming one faction, but that would be foolish. You always play with 4. Likewise with Subterra, which technically cannot be played correctly with 3 characters or even 1. You should always play with 4 or more. Star Trek 5-Year Mission requires 3 players minimum, but even at 2, my fiance and I often play with 3 characters each. And the enjoyment of these games mentioned so far is not affected by you doing this. Despite this, I would avoid playing like This War of Mine. I've gone into detail on my opinion on this game found on the Dice Tower. But to be honest, a game as depressing as that one probably should not hit the table at a time like this. This leaves a bunch of games that are by default multiplayer competitive games that offer a solo mode, often against a clock instead of rival players. Often these games employ a deck of specially designed AI cards that emulate an enemy player. The Automa mode included in many Stonemaier games are incredibly well made. These include Scythe, Viticulture, Tapestry, and Wingspan. I checked, and you all have one of these in your collection. Other big hits with solitaire modes include Terraforming Mars, Dinosaur Island, Kepler 3042, Nemesis, Underwater Cities, Tiny Epic Galaxies, Mage Knight, and Ex Libris, though many of those involve just trying to reach a specific high score. Alas, that does leave a bunch of remaining games, limited in player count with no included rules for solitaire play. Ones with deception and subterfuge like Sheriff of Nottingham, or straight up party games, they're basically out. But even looking at my own collection, that still leaves dozens of games I could play. Actually, my fiance does. I enjoy playing with people, and thankfully I have someone here to play with. My fiance, on the other hand, is an even bigger introvert than I. She enjoys setting up a big game and playing with herself, often for hours. Even as I type this, she's on her 3rd straight game of Bastion. We had just finished and won our 2nd game. I then departed to work on my writing. 2 hours later, and she's still there, committed to a victory, even after three straight losses. But it's not just the cooperative games. My fiance will also unpack a competitive game with no solo mode and simply play competitively, assuming all players. And this is not limited to short games. Even ones that can be played with 2 players, she'll play as 5. If curious as to how and why she does this, the answer lies with puzzles. Everyone knows how popular traditional puzzles are, now more than ever. And many people have accused cooperative games of being glorified puzzles. Except you can't lose a puzzle. Eventually, if you commit yourself, you will solve it. You can't fail a puzzle unless your patience gives out. Your reward at the end is the image you created. With a lot of games, the satisfaction of creation is still there. My fiance owns a large chunk of Carcassonne games. I have a video on that as well. She has taken whole weekends unpacking everyone to erect colossal tapestries of fictional abstract landscapes. Any game where players create something is one where a single player could create 2 or more puzzles simultaneously. My fiance has also spent all day playing an extended game of Feast for Odin or Caverna. Additionally, many games involving a narrative element can satisfy our desire to read books. My fiance and I both play Above and Below as well as Near and Far for the story, and not for the establishment of a winner. By playing on your own, you can employ the stories of multiple people and control the end game. You complete your experience when you wish. Whoever wins is ultimately unimportant. If the game requires an eventual victor, it's really not that difficult to assume each player and maximize tactics for that round. You would then assume a rival and do the same. Any game where the concealing of player information is not a vital game mechanic can be played this way. So, unpack Alien Frontiers, Century Spice Road, Sagrada, Gia, Great Western Trail, Roll for It, or Formula Day. Admit it. If you have 7 board games or 700, no matter the ratio involved, there are probably more games that you can play during this quarantine crisis than you probably thought. This is also based on if you can handle playing by yourself. Well, outside of that, there's still always Fortnite. This is Chris from D6 Machina.